think about the MakerBot, and that's fine to think about because that's the major 3D printer is the MakerBot. So most people think of that. Now, MakerBot is probably one of the bigger and one of the first mainstream 3D printed machines, or 3D printing machines, I should say, to hit the market, and it did so in the late 2000s to early 2010s is when we started to see the MakerBot. Now, I had heard about the MakerBot, not to brag, but before a lot of people had, just because I was interested in it from the get-go. That's not anything special about me. That's just because I'm really nerdy about 3D printing. But now there's this new machine that's printing in metal. Now, this one may be more important even than the MakerBot if it takes off. Now, I'll admit, I'm a bit of a gun nut. I'm a bit of a gun enthusiast, you might say, which is kind of funny considering my age because I'm not even 21 yet, so I can't even go buy a handgun yet, but I like them a lot. Well, one of the cool things about printing with metal, of course, is that metal is usually, depending on the metal and the alloy and all that stuff, usually stronger than plastic is. So that being the case, you can use it for say higher tolerance sort of things, high stress manufacturing, what have you. So that being the case, if we print out a metal, say AR-15 lower, now we have much more tolerance than you would with one of the polymer ones. So it's a very exciting new development. Now, I know that sort of might be a little bit counterintuitive to a lot of the people who are arguing for 3D printing being a harmless technology. I don't see guns as really a harmful thing anyway. So I might be a little bit weird about that. Not a lot of people, I think, in the South anyway, are really worried about firearms in the first place anyway. So it's that making that argument down here doesn't really matter that much. But if you're up in Yankee land, they might start getting a little bit antsy about it. But MatterFab is the name of the company, and they're wanting to change the way that metal 3D printing is done by making the process more scalable and affordable. So it's raised $5.75 million in funding already to continue to refine its 3D printing technology and to get its printers onto the production lines of industrial manufacturers, according to TechCrunch. So the MatterFab 3D printer is aimed at manufacturers looking to create direct production parts out of metal that were either too difficult or costly to create using traditional tool machining methods. By doing so, it has the potential to lower the cost of parts while also increasing the flexibility of the parts that can be created. The Series A funding was led by GE Ventures. Yeah, the same GE, as in General Electric GE, as in one of the largest military, not military, pardon me, but government contractors known to man at this point. GE is a huge, huge contractor for the government. The company had previously received funding from hardware incubator Lemnos, or Lemnos Labs, perhaps, where the company worked to refine the prototype version of its product. GE is a rather interesting investor, considering that the manufacturer's decision is to adopt 3D printing for some custom parts was part of the inspiration for MatterFab's founding. As TechCrunch wrote last year, saying MatterFab CEO Matt Burris got his start after growing up around his father's CNC machine shop in Indianapolis, and that shop specifically built machine parts for the aerospace industry. But about 3 years ago, GE started to 3D print some of the parts that the shop used to make. So, of course, instead of lying down and playing dead and saying, well, that's the end of the business for me, and complaining and trying to lobby against 3D printing, he himself tried to get into the 3D printing market, and it appears that he's doing a pretty good job so far. And that's something that drives me nuts about a lot of businesses around who complain about, or not who, but that complain about different, the owners of these businesses will complain about the changing climate in the marketplace. Instead of trying to fix the situation or trying to get into that new market and do it better, they complain and say that, well, it should be illegal or this new technology should be regulated because people aren't going to buy my saddles anymore. You know, can you imagine if the saddle maker lobby lobbied against the creation of automobiles and tried to lobby against them and regulate how they can be manufactured and so on? Henry Ford would go out of business as a result of these heavy new regulations. So these lobbyists are really helping nobody except themselves, and that's only short term anyway, because it's going to be just a matter of time until somebody figures out that these regulations are ridiculous and tries to circumvent them or just ignore them altogether. But anyway, so the investment could be used to help speed up availability of MatterFab machines, and for a company such as GE, which is looking to do more in the way of 3D printing, that day can't come soon enough. So the GE Ventures Senior Director Stephen Taub says, we've got lots of other parts under development. He noted that GE is looking for different ways to, or rather ways to differentiate its products using additive manufacturing, aka 3D printing. Additive manufacturing is what they used to call 3D printing back in the day, and they really don't anymore, thank goodness. because it's a not very market friendly phrase. When I talk about additive manufacturing, you're probably not going to know what I'm talking about. Well, you would because you're smart. But if we're talking to the layman, if I go down to Walmart and I stop somebody in one of the aisles and I say, hey, have you ever heard of additive manufacturing? Probably they're going to say no. But if I say, hey, have you heard about 3D printing? They'll go, oh, yeah. So you see, it's all about choice of words. And fortunately, 3D printing is a very marketable phrase. So that's what they're going with now when they're marketing 3D printers. There's a lot of different applications for 3D printing, of course. It could be medical, it could be for weaponry, it could be for everyday manufacturing of different parts. So it's a good thing that people are looking at this in a very positive light instead of trying to regulate it. Although, to say that nobody's trying to regulate it would be incorrect, because there are some lobbyists and some senators and congressmen and such who are afraid of 3D printing because of the potential to 3D print a weapon undetected. Little do they know, most likely, that you can create a weapon undetected already with an 80% parts kit that can be bought online and shipped to a P.O. box or some dummy address with a prepaid debit card. And it's really not something to be worried about, because usually the people who are going to go through all that trouble are people who are law-abiding people anyway. So criminals just buy guns in back alleys anyway, or they find them somewhere, or they buy them from their source, or what have you. So really the argument is moot, but there's opportunity now to regulate something to make money off of it. So that's what they're going to do. It's 9 times out of 10, I would say that the creation of funds is the inspiration behind a lot of different regulation. Unfortunately, that's usually the case anyway, from what we've been seeing with a lot of different regulation that comes out. I mean, think about what we have with different cars, right? All these regulations about how you drive your car. And if there's some infraction of those regulations, well, you bet you're going to be seeing some money taken out of your pocketbook. So a lot of the time it's all revenue generation. That's the motivation behind these things. Oh, kind of like sobriety checkpoints. You really think sobriety checkpoints are all about protecting people? I guarantee you they're not. It's all about revenue generation. Because in a traffic stop case where there are 250 people stopped, only one person was stopped for DUI. So only one person out of 250 was driving under the influence. So that's a very low margin. But many people were ticketed for not having a seatbelt on. Many people were ticketed for expired registration. All these different things that are so inconsequential and really not applicable to public safety or public welfare or anything like that. Any of those buzz phrases they like to throw around. But they got a lot of money out of it. Well, that's the motivation, of course, behind a lot of these different traffic stops. Now, some might argue, well, they did get that one guy out of 250. So isn't it worth it to have stopped that one guy, who may have crashed into somebody and killed somebody? Well, would have, could have, should have is not a very valid argument for an arrest anyway. But also, you have to consider that we're sacrificing rights, liberties, and such when stops such as these happen, which means we're sacrificing liberty in order to get security. And you know what Benjamin Franklin said about that. You deserve neither if you do that. So it's really a simple answer to the question of should we be doing these things. And it's really so simple. But anyway, MatterFab is this 3D printing company that's looking towards 3D printing with metal. For MatterFab, funding from GE will be used to invest in engineering and get its 3D printer commercially available and then bring it to market. On that front, the company is targeting the second half of next year for when MatterFab printers will actually start shipping to manufacturing customers. So MatterFab printers are probably going to be used by the more higher end audience, if that makes any sense. Sort of like a manufacturing company that's already in manufacturing, but can do away with some expensive machinery that's both expensive to run and expensive to maintain with one of these MatterFab 3D printers. So there's just that opportunity for there to be a new method for printing, a new method for manufacturing that's really helping out a lot of small businesses. This could potentially make it easy for somebody with very low overhead, very low capital that's been raised to start up a manufacturing company, manufacturing something that maybe nobody's ever thought of, or manufacturing replacement gears for some sort of machine that is commonplace in this particular field. There's a lot of different applications that can be made for these different 3D printing applications. Now, something very disturbing has just come out about the IRS, where it's appearing anyway that they're not quite as secure as you might think. In fact, they're very transparent, but not in the right way. If you're like a lot of people, you probably file your tax return I don't know why you do that, but you probably do that because most people think that they have to. Well, the IRS system has been mined now for over 100,000 taxpayer records by fraudsters, according to Ars Technica. In an official statement that was issued today, actually, or rather yesterday, May 26th, the IRS has announced that it has shut down an online service used to obtain tax records after determining that unusual activity has taken place on the application, which indicates that unauthorized third parties had access to some accounts on the transcript application. An initial review of that activity revealed that access was gained to more than 100,000 accounts through the Get Transcript application, according to the IRS statement. Now, we are expected to give most of your personal information over to the IRS. The IRS is expected to know everything about you. But for some reason, they can't really secure themselves very well when it comes to their own financial security. They're not very good at that. Now, if this were a private business, there'd be lawsuits out the wazoo. If there was a business, say, that dealt in, let's say, medical insurance, that had their records stolen like this, there'd be all sorts of lawsuits all over the place. That would happen. But it's the IRS, and your personal information was stolen by the IRS, who actually steals your information anyway. So really, it's sort of a second time your information has been stolen, and nobody's probably going to do anything about it. Worst case scenario, probably going to see some people with paid leave, which is, of course, aka vacation, somewhere in the Bahamas, maybe the U.S. Christmas Islands or the VI. Doesn't matter. After the IRS disclosed more information, it became clear that the user data was not obtained because of a direct hack of government systems. Rather, weak authentication used by the IRS to protect access to taxpayer data is likely at fault. So it is, in fact, the IRS's fault. The attackers were able to acquire taxpayer records using stolen personal identifying information, possibly pulled from online financial fraud marketplaces. Now, if you use the phrase online financial fraud marketplaces, you're probably thinking of a bunch of guys wearing black beanies or toboggans or toques, whatever you want to call them, wherever you're from. And they wear those, and they're sort of huddled around in an alley, and they're handing around USB keys or USB flash drives with a bunch of information on them. And really, it doesn't work that way. Most of the time, when we're talking about stolen financial information, it's just a web forum. That's just a very simple web forum where people will exchange information in exchange for Bitcoin. It's really simple, it's really small, and the FBI is really bad at busting them. And it's so simple and it's so easy, but the FBI just is not very good at doing what the FBI is supposed to do in the first place. So this stuff keeps going on. And honestly, I'm not really surprised because it's just not surprising that this sort of thing can happen. Plus, a lot of the time, the servers are actually held in a foreign location where the FBI doesn't have jurisdiction to them, and it takes a long time to get another country to not correspond, but to correspond and to cooperate with FBI requests for seizure of data. Most of the time, because people don't actually trust the FBI. I mean, who does? So it's just a problem all around. But of course, the root of the problem is poor security on the side of government infrastructure. There's next to no security when it comes to a lot of these different government agencies. Well, think about it this way. Think about how many times you've heard about the Pentagon being hacked by the Chinese or by the Russians or by the North Koreans or what have you. You keep hearing about it. Now, if the Chinese can hack into the Pentagon, probably anybody could hack into the Pentagon, right? And actually, average everyday people have hacked into the Pentagon. It's not hard. It's actually astoundingly easy. Back in the early days of computers, people were hacking into the Pentagon. Read Kevin Mitnick's autobiography, where he got into very sensitive information, not for any sort of black hat purposes, mostly just to say that he could. But read his autobiography. You'll learn a lot about how simple it was back in the day. And I really doubt it's gotten much harder today, where it's all these different different sources of information are just ripe for the taking. It's a low-hanging fruit that's just right there, and they're practically begging you to take this information. And it's no surprise that people are doing it. It's just ridiculous to me that all this information is just right there, and people are taking it, obviously. I mean, can you fault them? It's right there. And yet there's not really much being done to secure this information. This is very, very sensitive information. Now, technically, your social security number, just as an example, is not meant to be used as any form of identifier. It even says that on the back of the card. Nevertheless, you use it to prove that you are who you say you are a lot of the time. So despite the fact that it's not supposed to be used as a form of ID, it is a lot of the time. So having your social security number out there can be very dangerous. Now, if you don't have a social security number, obviously that's one less thing for you to worry about. And if you don't have a social security number, I applaud you for not. I wish I didn't, honestly. Unfortunately, my parents were not educated on the dangers of having one, so I have one. But I wish I didn't. Now, if you didn't have a social security number, that would be one less thing for you to worry about. If you don't have a tax ID, that's one less thing for you to worry about. There's a lot of things that if you just don't have them, that's one less thing to worry about. But unfortunately, probably most Americans, I can be safe in saying that most Americans have a social security number and pay some form of taxes. They have some form of tax ID. They've signed a W-2 form, what have you. So these financial records are out there and in IRS databases and probably other databases too, and are ripe for the taking. Consider this. How many layers does it have to go through? If you're going to the DMV, you probably had to put your social security number through the DMV, right, to get your driver's license. You also have your photo that's taken by the DMV, and that's put in some database somewhere as well. You also have your first, last, middle name, your mother's maiden name, all sorts of different information that's out there in these different databases that the DMV takes in, that the IRS takes in, that the FBI looks over and probably has a file on you somewhere as well. There's all sorts of different sources for these informations, these different forms of information, I should say. So it's no surprise when it gets hacked, right? People act like this is the most outraging thing, but it's really not, because it happens all the time. And it's not the most outrageous thing to ever happen. It's just common sense that it would. So I don't get all the outrage that's surrounding this. The outrage is, I think, being pushed in the wrong direction anyway. People are not getting mad at the institution which they should be getting upset with, which is the IRS. People are not getting upset with the institution which they should be getting upset with, which is the giant machinery of the federal government system. That's where the anger should be directed. But instead, people are worried about these hackers who are really just doing what is really human nature to do anyway. It's just to be expected that these people are going to be taking our information when it's so easy to take. Like, you see $100 laying down on the side of the road. Of course you're going to take it, right? You see $100 that's laying down in the middle of the street. You don't know whose it is. Of course you're going to take it. So that's what's happening with all these hackers. Is all this different information, which is a excellent source of profit. You know, you can get so much information out of this. Of course they're going to take it. It's just common sense that they're going to take it. So really, the IRS is at fault for not securing it better. Well, the Get Transcript Online feature of IRS.gov allows taxpayers, I don't know why you're that, to get tax account transactions, line by line tax return information, or wage and income reported to us for a specific tax year, they say. To obtain a transcript online, all that was needed to start the process was a social security number and an active email address. Now, wait a minute. I thought a social security number wasn't meant to act as an identifier, but in the IRS's internal systems, it is. Well, that's weird. Once the email address was confirmed as legitimate, the system would then ask a number of questions about personal, financial, and tax information, including the date of birth, the tax filing status, and the address before providing the transcript for download. For download. Say that again. For download, which means you have this now in physical form in some sense, on your computer. So now you have somebody's financial records on your computer, probably in PDF form or an Excel file or whatever. And now you have this on your computer. And we're supposed to have faith in the federal system, right? This sort of authentication, known as knowledge-based authentication, is highly vulnerable to fraud. No kidding. It's based on information that never changes, and such data is widely available to anyone willing to pay for it from stolen financial information marketplaces. These transcripts that were fraudulently downloaded were likely made accessible due to leaked social security numbers and other personal data from any one of the recent data breaches. And there have been many, some of which you may not have even heard about, some of which I haven't even heard about. There's probably some financial breach somewhere in another country where information can be had that way. Or there's financial breaches that nobody's heard about because nobody knows that it's happened. See, this is the problem. That's one side effect of the digital age. It is one side effect. But the problem isn't that we're living in a digital society. The problem is that the federal government is, in some cases, illegally keeping information on people. And corporations, too, are sometimes illegally keeping information on us. Well, think about your bank. Probably has your social security number, right? Well, it's not supposed to be a form of identification. And banks, to their credit, probably have better security than the federal government does. But still, this information can be had actually pretty easily. So it's no surprise that the IRS got hacked. And that's the sad part about it, right? It's no surprise that the IRS got hacked. Of course the IRS got hacked. It was only a matter of time. This is not the first time, nor is it the last time that the IRS has been hacked. I guarantee you. And that's just the problem with the system that we have, where there's all this information that you're freely giving out. Why are you doing that? What's the problem here? It's a very big one.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am? You think I know nothing about
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hi, this is your computer speaking. I don't feel so well. It's like I've come down with a bug, and I'm getting slower.
Affordable Computers. We fix sick computers. Your hometown guys at Affordable Computers will repair your PC in half the time of the big boys at an affordable price. No tricks, no gimmicks, no computer speak technobabble. Just good, quick, and courteous affordable service and repairs. Want to affordably supercharge your PC? Affordable Computers on Highway 58. Affordable Computers hand builds all desktops in-house. If you're looking for a better-than-new refurb laptop, $150 will get you a Dell or another name brand at Affordable Computers. Affordable Computers, Highway 58, between Arby's and Taco Bell. Also Fort O, Battlefield Parkway, near Holcomb's. Affordable Computers, we service what we sell. Call 499-1975. That's 499-1975.
Wow, this is amazing. I'm feeling great. Supercharged.
Do you feel better outside your home or business than in? Indoor air quality is important. Mildew, mold, smoke, water, and rodent damage are prime causes of poor indoor air quality. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals, better known as Duct Busters, cleans HVAC systems using 127 definable Duct Busters steps. Let Mark Thompson address the indoor air quality at your business to help reduce employee illnesses. Prevent fires by cleaning your dryer vents. Mark and his parents, Dick and Joan Thompson, have been building our local economy and helping local people with HVAC systems 16 years. Ducts, Indoor Air Professionals. Call 876-9907. 876-9907. Ducks. Call now.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
You love your hometown. Are you interested in free markets, in local economy? Do you hope that Chattanooga can survive the next meltdown, the next chain of disasters in the national economy? What's the best way to live out the ideals of self-government and self-determination? Join me, David.
Fox News Radio. I'm Lillian Wu, the U.S. Attorney General tackling corruption among top officials in worldwide soccer.
They were expected to uphold the rules that keep soccer honest and to protect the integrity of the game. Instead, they corrupted the business of worldwide soccer to serve their interests and to enrich themselves.
Loretta Lynch on FIFA officials being brought to the U.S. to face charges in a sweeping bribery and money laundering investigation. The president of FIFA not being charged at this time. As the search continues for 11 people missing in Texas storms, the governor there warning people to be careful.
We all have some family member or friend who's been affected.
The flooding is also harming neighborhoods north of Texas and Oklahoma. Between the two states, 17 people are said to have been killed.
Fox Radio's Evan Brown. And Congress demanding answers on how identity thieves got hold of personal tax information from an IRS website. Fox News. We report, you decide.
News Talk 1240.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
I suppose the larger headline of the day is the hacking of the IRS, which is, again, no surprise, right? Like, we keep seeing all these headlines about how, oh, what a terrible thing it is that the IRS has been hacked. And yeah, it's not good, but it's, well, number one, it's certainly not the worst thing to ever happen. But number two, it's just no surprise. And I'm sure once the larger news outlets catch on that this has happened, they're going to be pretending to be all outraged, and there'll be talks about how the IRS is corrupt and yada yada, and probably the president is to blame for this as well somehow. And we're going to be seeing that, obviously. But really, it's not anyone's fault but us, the population, because we have become so complacent with what's been going on, right? Where people are filing tax returns and people are willfully giving up their social security numbers and willfully giving their kids social security numbers, even worse, and acting like this is a totally okay and fine thing to do, when in reality, this is the worst thing you can do as a society, because now we're subjecting ourselves to what is institutionalized slavery. It really is. You are now subject to the federal government. You've made yourself subject to the federal government, and it's just astounding how people will play into that and then even defend that with some weird sense of patriotism that people keep having about how this is just the best thing ever. You know, we're the greatest nation ever. Look at how cool we are. Also, sell your kids into slavery. Right? That's basically the message that we keep getting. And if you don't, you're not patriotic. If you don't pay your taxes right, then you're not patriotic, and you probably don't like the troops either. That's always the narrative that keeps getting put out there. And I think enough people are starting to catch on that this is really not right, and it's actually kind of ridiculous. This narrative keeps getting pushed on us, pushed on us and pushed on us and pushed on us, that eventually there's going to have to be a breaking point. Now, what's going to be the solution, or not the solution, pardon me, but what's going to be the result of that breaking point? I don't know. I might not even be alive when it happens. But we are going to be seeing quite a bit of unrest. Maybe not a violent form of unrest, although that's entirely possible. But maybe a technological schism will also be occurring, where people are simply refusing to comply. And a refusal to comply on a mass scale would make the system collapse in on itself. It's unsustainable anyway, the system that we have. It's completely unsustainable. And that's okay, because I don't like it anyway. So if it collapses in on itself, hey, fine. So people will think that there'll be this awful situation where there's going to be a cataclysm. There's going to be the end of times is on its way, and we're going to be seeing this terrible situation where there's going to be people who are shooting each other in the streets and looting and rioting and all sorts of things. And while that's entirely possible, I do see it as a little bit unlikely. And there are a few reasons why that is. The first big one is that here in the South especially, we're very local economy minded. So the small businesses will probably continue to be running, and maybe we'll find some form of alternative currency, but things will work themselves out. Well, think about during the Weimar Republic and its collapse in Germany, where there wasn't chaos in the streets and there weren't people looting and shooting each other and all these sorts of things. There may have been on a smaller scale, but when the government collapsed then, things just sort of continued on as normal for a lot of people, because it's usually not in the back of everyone's mind that as soon as government collapses, I'm going to take the first opportunity to shoot everybody and get as much canned food as I can. Most people don't think that way. So we probably won't be seeing that. Now, it's not to say that people who are prepping or whatever are wrong. Certainly, it's good to be prepared, and certainly it's a good thing to have a stockpile of weaponry if it's needed. But it's a little bit unlikely to me that there's going to be some sort of WROL without rule of law situation, because there's always going to be a law, whether or not there's going to be a police force to enforce that law. And this is a fundamental misunderstanding that so many people have about law, is that if suddenly the Constitution were to disappear, there would be no more law. And it doesn't work that way, because the Constitution is derived from a higher source anyway. It's taken from two places, British common law, obviously, and it's also taken from, of course, Magna Carta was a big influence, but also the law of God was probably one of the larger influences on the formation of the Constitution. So even if the Constitution just suddenly disappeared, it's not like that would be the end of times for everybody. The rest of the world, despite what some people may think, doesn't necessarily hinge on the existence of the United States. It may to some degree, but if we suddenly disappeared, I don't think that that somebody over in Siberia would really necessarily notice. And that's just a cold fact of life. That's just life. That's just how it is. We give ourselves a sense of self-importance because everybody does. Everybody gives themselves a sense of self-importance. And that may be a little bit unwarranted in a lot of cases. But if I were to suddenly disappear, I don't think somebody over in some other country would really notice, although I'm sure a few people in Canada would. And it's this ridiculous sense of self-importance that a lot of people have about the nation as a whole. That's really kind of a problem, actually, because it makes people think that we're immune to any sort of moral judgment because of all the different ills that we commit, because we do it for the right reasons or something like that. Double standards, right? Ridiculous. Well, we have a unfortunate system in place here where it's now the trend, it's now the norm to give away all of our personal information to some source for a sense of convenience, because it's just more convenient. Well, you file taxes because it's just more convenient if you do. You're going to get in trouble if you don't. Well, that's such a lazy attitude anyway to say that I don't want to get in trouble. I just don't want to get in trouble. Well, unfortunately, that's life. You're going to get in trouble at some point. And it's just so ridiculous to me that people are so willing to throw away all of their personal info just for a little bit of convenience. Well, the sort of authentication that the IRS had was incredibly, incredibly insecure. The sort of authentication that the IRS had that was hacked is called knowledge-based authentication. It's highly vulnerable to fraud, and it's based on information which never changes, your personal information, right? As such, the data is widely available to anyone who's willing to pay for it from stolen financial information marketplaces, which are widely available as well. The transcripts that were fraudulently downloaded were likely made accessible due to leaked social security numbers and other personal data from any one of the many recent data breaches, including those at the health insurers Anthem and CareFirst. In fact, security reporter Brian Krebs reported on the risks inherent in the IRS transcript request system way back in March. He warned that taxpayers to sign up for accounts on irs.gov only to prevent someone from creating a fraudulent account for their records first. So it's incredibly easy, apparently, to sign up for an account on irs.gov using fraudulent information. And how are you going to prove that you are the person who you say you are if somebody else is already logged in as you with all of your personal information? The only way really to prove that would be to show up in person with all of your birth certificates, all these different records in hand to some local IRS office to prove that you are you. And even then, they'd have to disable the irs.gov account, which would probably require so much paperwork and so much bureaucracy that it just wouldn't ever happen. So that's the problem. It's one of many problems anyway, not the problem, but one of many problems with the taxing system that we have. Of course, the fact that we're taxed the way we are, period, is kind of a problem. But the way that the process occurs is just so ridiculous. I think about how a lot of people send their tax returns in through the mail anyway. That's not very secure. You really want to send that sensitive information through the mail, which can actually easily be stolen from your mailbox? Just think about what time it is, right? Like if your neighbor across the street is the person who might be of a fraudulent mind, we'll say, and he knows that it's tax season and he knows that you pay your taxes. All he has to do is get up at 3 a.m. every morning and check your mail to see if you've put your tax return in the mailbox. And then if you have, just take it. Easy as that. So it's really not hard to take all sorts of information. It's just not. Now, you can file your taxes online, obviously, but again, that's not hard to steal either. So the whole tax return system that we have is incredibly easy to break, because it's already broken. It's like breaking something that's already broken. Of course it is. Well, it's just silly what we have going on here. This is AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio, and we're everywhere. You can listen live to Hot News Talk Radio at hotnewstalkradio.com. Download the TuneIn Radio app and search for Hot News Talk Radio. Hot News Talk Radio is on Twitter, where you report, the world decides. It's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. And you can save half off now. Go to hotnewstalkradio.com and click on the half off link for great deals. Hot News Talk Radio saves you money. That's AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. Automax is a nice car lot where top quality used cars are $2,000 less sometimes than the other car lots. Louis has an unpretentious little car lot just east of Central High on Highway 58. He has low overhead. He doesn't have any staff because he does everything himself, right down to the washing of the cars. He does it all himself. He passes his savings on to you, and everyone can get a car and rebuild their credit as well, because once you make your car payments, he reports that to the different credit agencies, all three of them. That's Louis at Automax. Call 643-2886 and then ask for Louis and tell him that you heard about us on Hot News Talk Radio, and I'm sure he'll be happy to hear that. So in the case that was outlined by Mr. Krebs, the false return was sent back to the bank account of a college student who had answered a Craigslist ad for money-making opportunities. She sent much of the money via Western Union to an address in Nigeria while retaining some of her services. The student claimed that she was unaware of anything illegal going on. And this is just one case where people's financial information was given out with the person who was giving it out not knowing that anything wrong is going on. Today's disclosed data breach did not involve the circumvention of any of the IRS's core security systems, an IRS spokesperson noted in the agency's statement. The IRS notes that this issue does not involve its main computer system that handles tax filing submission, and that system remains secure for now. Now, it's also funny to me that this is such a grandiose effort of damage control on the side of the IRS. Any faith lost in the government is a big problem for them, because faith lost in the government means sort of a mental investment lost in the government, where they start losing mental shares in the form of faith in the government. And when those start to go away, when there's a collapse of faith, when there's a crash in belief in the federal government, they will, in a sense, cease to exist, because no one will believe that they do. And no one will really care about their existence either. So this is a very big problem for them that they're trying to sort of fix. They really need this to be fixed, where if people stop believing in the legitimacy of the federal government, they won't know what to do other than to force you to believe in them with their guns and their bombs and their tanks. So it's really funny how on edge they are about everything. And of course, the news agencies are all too happy to increase the faith in the federal government at every opportunity. Even think about it this way: on cable news, you'll hear about different opinion shows talking about what a problem it is that people are losing faith in the federal government. They act like that's a problem, right? They act like this is the biggest thing ever. Like, oh no, people are losing faith in the federal government. And they act like it's our fault that we're losing faith in the federal government, or the federal government should do something to fix this problem, or people are losing faith in them. Well, I say good. People are losing faith in the federal government. That's a good thing, because I don't particularly want them to be around. But that's sort of a dangerous statement to make. You know, I might walk out and the brake lines will be cut in my car, and I'll crash over the edge of a bridge, and I'll die a fiery death, and it'll be ruled to be an accident by somebody who's been paid off by a guy wearing an FBI jacket. So it's dangerous to say these things, very dangerous. And I don't mean these things in a militant way. That's the funny thing, because so many people are concerned about these what do they call them, the Tea Party militias and stuff, and people are worried about that. And these Tea Party militias are going to rise up and they're going to start shooting at cops and stuff. And well, that may happen, but I think the collapse is going to be less violent than that, because it's just a simple loss in faith that totally wrecks the whole system, where people suddenly say, you know what? Federal government's not really doing that much good when it comes right down to it. I'm not going to pay my taxes this year. And enough people do that, and suddenly they don't know what to do. People don't believe in them. The whole collapse occurs that way, in a completely nonviolent way, just by people deciding to not do something one day. It's as easy as that. Just decide to not do something one day, and suddenly the whole thing collapses around them. It's unsustainable anyway. It's completely unsustainable the way it's set up, because, well, one, we have a system of currency that's based upon debt, which can never be extinguished anyway. That's totally unsustainable. We have a banking system that's also dependent on subprime and subprime loans and all these different things, and that's totally unsustainable as well. It's just ridiculous. The whole banking system, the whole financial system, the whole taxing system, the whole government system, unsustainable. That's all it is. It's so easy. And eventually it has to collapse, like anything. It's like a building it's like Jenga, right? You ever play the board game Jenga, where you're pulling out the little pieces, and once every day a new news story comes out, and that's sort of a piece pulled out of the big Jenga tower. And eventually it's going to wobble and collapse, because enough people will see all the holes in it and realize what a big problem there is here. And eventually that's going to happen. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even soon, but eventually it will, because it has to. And that's okay. People are worried about this like it's just the biggest cataclysm that's ever going to happen, and people are pulling their hair out worrying about the collapse of government. And I'm not really worried about it. People say, oh, without rule of law, think about all the roving gangs of bandits and the people driving the beat up Dodge Rancheros with their dirty AK-47s that they bought from the black market. And it'll be like Terminator. You ever see Terminator? It's going to be like that. It's going to be like Mad Max. Oh man, it's going to be terrible. And I kind of doubt that, because if there's a collapse of a financial institution, I don't know about you, but I'm not going to turn into a violent maniac. I don't know about you, but I'm not going to turn into a looter, because I have sources for food, and probably you do too. And there is such a thing as charity. There is such a thing as a church where people will be happy to offer you food and help. And there is such a thing as a small business which would be happy to trade your labor for different resources. And these things will still exist whether or not there's a federal government or not. I think partially the whole idea of there not being a federal government resulting in some sort of cataclysm might be an idea that people who work in federal government are all too happy to perpetrate, because it makes us think that we need them for society to keep existing. And really, we don't. And that's such a silly idea anyway, that we somehow, without these people sitting in their offices filing all this paperwork, without people arresting you for driving too fast on the highway, without that system in place, we'll just not know what to do, and people will stop going to work every day, and there'll be chaos, and there'll be people crashing their cars intentionally because there's no one to tell them that that's illegal and wrong. And that's not going to happen. This cataclysm, the idea of a cataclysm, which the media and the people in government, I'm sure, are all too happy to perpetrate, is just ridiculous and is really unrealistic. It's an unrealistic idea, kind of like a federal government, actually. But anyway, that's what's happening with the IRS. They've been pretty well hacked. They've been pretty well wrecked. They've been pretty well had. And that's the story, basically. And it's not really any surprise. Well, something else has been going on with regarding law enforcement is a county sheriff over in San Bernardino County over in California, where there's been a sheriff who's used the Stingray device over 300 times without a warrant. So San Bernardino Sheriff's Department doesn't tell judges that it's using a spy device. Well, that's illegal, obviously, and it's illegal on many levels. It's not just illegal on a state level. It's also illegal on a federal law level. It's illegal on a constitutional level, obviously. If they're not filing a record and yet taking information for use in an investigation, well, let me tell you something. Let me just reach over here and grab this nice little document I got here that people swear to uphold. Oh, here we go. U.S. Constitution. What do you know? Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures should not be violated. No warrant shall issue but upon probable causes, provided by oath or affirmation, in particular describing the place to be searched and persons or things to be seized. Whew, that's very easy, isn't it? That's a simple idea. And yet these people swore to uphold that idea. These people swore to uphold the ideology that your persons and papers, or your effects and such, shall not be taken but upon an oath or affirmation by probable cause, and warrants shall issue and all that stuff. But these people are forgoing the whole process, saying that, well, I don't really care about a warrant which shall issue. This is about probable cause, or this is about the protection of the homeland. This is about counterterrorism, where if we're talking about a case of counterterrorism, I don't really need a warrant. If now it's a question of counterterrorism, I don't particularly need a warrant because there might be a bomb plot. I don't need a warrant if there's a bomb plot, because certainly no judge would in time give me a warrant if there's a bomb plot occurring. So that's always the big issue. That's always the big argument that, well, you know, what about counterterrorism? What about counterterrorism? I say, well, what about it? There's still a legal process, even if there is a counterterrorism effort going on. And they get all hot under the collar and say, you probably support ISIS, don't you? Well, the sheriff in San Bernardino County, which is east of Los Angeles County, has now deployed a Stingray hundreds of times without a warrant, under questionable judicial authority. Now, the Stingray device is, of course, also known as a cell site simulator, and this device is used by law enforcement to capture locational information, to capture transmissions of data such as your the text messages, your voice calls, all that sort of thing. All that information is captured by a Stingray device. So it's really easy to use, and the Harris Corporation is the corporation which issues those out. And of course, the folks in the Harris Corporation are all too happy to oblige law enforcement, whether it's illegal or not. I'm sure they don't particularly care over there. They're all too happy to issue out these different devices. And it's a shame that they are, but again, it's all about profits for them. So in response to a public records request, the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department sent Ars Technica, among several other news outlets, a rare example of a template for a pen register and trap and trace order application. In the letter, the county lawyers claimed that it was a warrant application template, but that is not true. The SBSD, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department, is a law enforcement agency for the entire county. That's a pretty large county, considering that's the 12th most populous county in the United States. And it's the 5th most populous county in California. Well, that means that 5 of the most populous counties are in California alone. That's quite an accomplishment, California. Way to go. Stingrays or cell site simulators can be used to determine location by spoofing a cell tower, but they can also be used to interpret calls and text messages. Once one has been deployed, the devices can now intercept data from target phones, here's a kicker, as well as information from other phones within the vicinity. For years, federal and local law enforcement have tried to keep their existence a secret while simultaneously upgrading their capabilities. Over the last year, as the devices have been increasingly scrutinized, new information about the secretive devices has been revealed. Now, you're not going to hear about this on cable news. You're not going to hear about this on the 5 o'clock news on your local TV station. Why? Well, because this is a subject of hot debate. Not the sort of hot debate that the cable news stations are all too happy to oblige in, or to engage in, I should say. It's not an issue of look how bad the president looks right now. It's not an issue of, look how bad the Tea Party patriots look right now. It's an issue of look how bad law enforcement looks right now, because folks in law enforcement are using these different technologies without warrants, and the people in law enforcement are actually engaging in illegal activity. So you have to continue the narrative that there are good cops all over the place and it's only a certain percentage of cops that are bad and all these different things that are really just bogus and outrageous anyway. But we keep seeing this narrative where people will talk all day where they'll be talking about what a terrible thing some policeman has done over in California. But they always have to tack on to the end. But of course, we recognize and respect the necessity of law enforcement, and we certainly appreciate them and their everyday risks and all the different risks that they take every day to protect us and yada, yada, yada. And you sort of have to throw that in there. Otherwise, you might be seen as a cop hater or something like that. And they'll give you extra tickets, and they'll say you're going 70 and a 55, even though you're only going 65 and a 55 and all these sorts of things. And people are so afraid of breaking that narrative, of sort of breaking that conditioning where people are, and that's a strong way to put it, I know, but people are sort of afraid of breaking that narrative in the media. And it's not just the so-called mainstream media. I'm throwing air quotes out there. You can't see them, but if you're watching on the webcam on YouTube, on Hot News Talk Radio on YouTube, you can see me using air quotes, where the mainstream media is afraid to throw out that narrative because it collapses people's confidence in the law enforcement and retention of data system, the debt collection system, the glorified debt collectors, which are called police officer system. It breaks that whole narrative that those are always the good guys and they can do no wrong and the thin blue line and all that sort of thing. And it breaks that narrative. So if we break that narrative, then people will suddenly start rioting and looting, and law enforcement won't know what to do, and there will be people crashing into each other because there won't be any laws telling them not to do that and all that sort of thing. Well, these law enforcement agencies, which are, of course, doing always the right thing, have been breaking the law over in San Bernardino County. Well, just last week, the FBI released a statement regarding the usage of stingrays, which claims the opposite of what its non-disclosure agreement with local law enforcement actually says. So the SBSD also declined to produce policies, guidelines, training materials, or specific cases where stingrays are used. Nevertheless, they're using them illegally. If you don't have a warrant, you can't capture information. It's not plainly visible to you, so you're capturing information without a warrant. That's what we in the business call illegal. That's what we in the business call a crime. And yet probably somebody in the San Bernardino Sheriff's Department might be seeing paid leave, and he'll get a nice vacation over to Hawaii, and that's probably the worst they'll see of it. There's not proper scrutiny because people are afraid to offer proper scrutiny without being called anti-American or unpatriotic or cop haters or what have you. And you'll have the old narrative screamed in your face that blue lives matter and such. And so you can't really question a lot of police activities without being called somebody who just hates the police or something along that line. And I don't hate them on a personal level. I really don't. I'm sure a lot of them are very nice people, but it's the job. It's the situation that they put themselves in knowingly, where they are breaking our constitutional rights every single day, and they seem to be okay with that. And that's kind of a problem. Well, Nuganomics.com with David Toulis is coming up in just a few seconds right here on Hot News Talk Radio. And this is, of course, Hot News Talk Radio and Digital Drive.
This is a mob mode. This is the mob mode. What kind of fool do you think I am?
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Surgery does not have to be financially painful. Hi, I'm Surgical Dr. David Red, and I'd like to invite you to my walk-in surgery clinic in North Shore. Quick Surge brings you immediate relief from moles, skin tags, maybe a laceration. Quick Surge. You walk in, fill out a mini form, I numb the area I'll treat, and before you know it, you're on your way home. Do I take insurance? No, because I take cash customers. I have super low and fixed prices, credit card, check, or cash. Uninsured, member of the working financially disadvantaged, choose Quick Surge. I publish prices online. No murk, just sunshine. Hassle-free, pain-free. Love the idea of a personal relationship with a doctor? Drop in with a nasty cut from work. Quick Surge, I'll take care of you. Quick Surge in the Public Center on the North Shore. No insurance hassles with Quick Surge. The national medical system is dysfunctional, overpriced, very alienating. I'm part of the solution, and so are you. Come on home. QuickSurge.com. QUIKSURG. Relief.
When my brother and I opened the First Jets Pizza, we believed if we made the best pizza, customers would find us. So we made fresh dough each day, used fresh toppings, and premium mozzarella cheese. 300 plus stores later, we still do.
Try Jet's famous 8-corner pizza with premium mozzarella cheese and one topping, now just $11.99 for a limited time only. Jet's Pizza, the best pizza in town. 3600 Hickson Pike.
Life is short. Eat better pizza.